The crew of the Newcastle rescue helicopter had few details when they arrived on scene this morning. They quickly assessed the impossibility of landing on the Panamanian registered coal ship, and with no other way of treating the injured crewmen, paramedics Fiona Cooper and Alan Playford were lowered to the deck. The rescue helicopter flew back to Newcastle while the 39-year-old man was stabilised.
He fell some 4 metres from a ladder whilst working within the hold itself, fell heavily to the ground and broke his thigh rather badly.
More than an hour after they had dropped the rescue crew on board, the helicopter returned to carry out a winching operation never before attempted. In most ship rescues, the patient is winched from the deck of the ship, but this morning that was impossible. On the first go, swirling dust hampered the operation, the helicopter forced to pull away. Eventually, both paramedic and patient were winched more than 50 metres from within the ship.
So that was a difficult winch. It just took a lot of work amongst the crew to make sure it went off okay. It was a hard hover reference and a bit of exacting hoisting there. Just well done on the crew, I guess.
Back on the ground, pilot Dave Friedman explained what could have gone wrong in such a confined space.
Perhaps the most significant thing and concern was the fact the stretcher could spin very rapidly and very violently, especially where the air from the rotor wash is contained in such a small space, and that was our deepest concern.
Tonight, the Filipino crewman is in a satisfactory condition in Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
When global funding was recently introduced to government schools, it gave principals a greater responsibility on how funds would be used. But the Education Department has confirmed state schools are withholding millions of dollars in bank accounts. The Minister claiming this puts an end to allegations of unnecessary cutbacks.
Clearly, schools are travelling very well. However, I am concerned to ensure that money that is given for today's students is spent where it is for the reason that it's given, and that is on today's students.
The Minister says some schools accumulate funds earmarked for major building projects. Anything else is questionable.
If it's there at the end of the payment period, then those schools need to start spending money on their students because that's why they were given the money.
Visiting Singleton High School today, Mrs Chadwick officially launched a new teaching resource kit aimed at educating students about our biggest export dollar earner, the coal industry. Sponsored by the New South Wales Coal Association, it includes teaching aids and a video to be used by all junior high science and geography students.
Well, they represent hopefully our future employees. They almost certainly represent decision makers of the future as they grow up and mature and move through society. And so we want to start with them and make sure that they've got a balanced viewpoint on it.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
Against the advice of her father, a 14-year-old Norma left school in 1942 to pursue a career as a pastry cook. Now aged 67, she is still rolling her own brand of pies and cakes. Her whole working life has been spent at this small pie shop in Adamstown, which she has owned for the past 15 years. Would you say the shop has changed at all in the 50 years?
Not much in appearance, that's for sure.
Walking into the Nell Gwyn pie shop is like entering a time warp. An antiquated rolling machine and old stuff. But the customers keep on buying the tasty treats as quick as Norma can make them. The combined effects of spiralling rent and old age have forced Norma to retire from the business. She will leave on the 25th of this month and is planning to sell all her equipment to either other pie shops or antique dealers. Why are you retiring after all these years?
Well, I think after all these years I deserve it, don't you?
Resting at his Mount Hutton home, Dozier tested the movement in his knees. He was unable to straighten either leg and had great difficulty in walking.
They're pretty sore. Just had the surgery yesterday, so they're a bit stiff, and of course the soreness is there.
The injury occurred during the National Basketball League off-season, when Dozier was in America visiting family and friends.
I went to the gym and tried to work out and get myself in some shape to play, and went home and the knees were real sore. Normally I get over soreness, but this one lingered on for months.
The exploratory surgery on both his knees showed that the three-time NBL Defensive Player of the Year was in surprisingly good condition.
Just a lot of wear and tear, and it said just little particles that was in there, little debris, and he just flushed them out and cleaned it out real good. And it was a real simple process in their book, and I should be able to get back within weeks.
Dozier is due to make his comeback on the court early next month, well in time for the Falcons' first NBL hit-out in April. Jason Nieuwenhof, NBN News.
A grim tragedy for a young nation needing more and more production. A tragedy that will have repercussions for many months to come. Not only does production cease, but transport of nearly 40,000...
When white settlement began in the West Wallsend area in the 1850s, pioneers forged the foundations of a booming mining industry.
That's an old telephone from down in the mine. It's from Stockrington Pit. And there's a piece of old railway line that came from one of the private railways that used to go into Cockle Creek.
Studying the area's history has taken on new meaning for students at West Wallsend High. Over the past 8 years, a small display of memorabilia has grown into a living museum.
It's something that a textbook can't give you, and that's a sense of empathy or a hands-on approach to history.
An estimated 1,000 items have been collected, but others are still needed.
I think that if people live in West Wallsend or in the area and they want to see their heritage preserved, perhaps have a look at in their garages or out the backyard and see if there's something that is relevant that could be shared by all of us, by the students in the community. So if you split up now and start working, you can work in pairs if you like, and you can discuss this with each other.
You're able to see what things I had to use as tools and sort of compare it with today's sort of things, and it's quite amazing really.
I didn't know very much, but now I reckon I'll learn a lot.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
Stuart Martin is the best wave sailor in Australia. He proved that by winning the national title in South Australia last week. The 23-year-old, who makes his own boards, is now setting his sights on the international circuit. First stop will be Hawaii next month, where the conditions will be very different to down under.
You've got big waves every day, like 8-9 foot every day, and a solid 25 knots cross-shore wind, where here it just doesn't really ever happen, basically.
The Lake Macquarie resident tried his hand in America last year, only to break his foot, that injury keeping him off the board for 6 months. But having wrapped up the Australian title as well as the New South Wales title for the third consecutive year earlier this month, he's ready to have another crack at the highly rated Hawaiians. Is it intimidating getting out there against them, an Australian up against a Hawaiian?
It can be, yeah, because they live there, they sail it every day, and it's a lot harder for you to actually beat them, but it can be done.
From Hawaii, Stuart intends competing in other international contests in Japan and Europe, with the view of gaining a world ranking. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Representing many sections of the community, the gathering focused on problems caused by youths congregating around entrances and exits to Charlestown Square, intimidating shoppers. Although only 3 cases of vandalism have occurred in the past few months, around a dozen break-and-enter and stealing offences have been reported to police. The major problems taking place late Thursday, Friday and Saturday nights.
And we've heard about broken telephones, lights, kicked over walls, broken plate glass windows. It's fairly serious, so we can't let it go on as it is.
A number of ideas were suggested to combat the problem. A weekly Thursday night concert has been proposed, as well as a drop-in coffee shop that would operate during the early hours of the morning. Also discussed was the issue of available security. While Beat Police say they'll continue to patrol the mall area, shop owners will be asked to help fund more security personnel.
It's a very nice place to come to meet, and we must put in place some programs that accommodate that. We can't say that this doesn't belong to anybody. It's a valid meeting place for all the communities.
Melinda Smith, NBN News. When Newcastle Buses signed its 5-year commercial agreement with the state government last year, it aimed to provide a more efficient operation.
Your other option is actually to go from Merewether into town and then change, and you've got a lot more to choose from that are going to Charlestown.
The company launched a review of services, calling on the community for input.
We've received that, we're now working through those, and we hope to be in position fairly shortly to be able to say, well, this is what we believe is the final proposal for the Newcastle for a good bus plan.
By mid-year, a remodelled route and timetable system will be introduced. In addition, 4 new inner-city bus stops have been proposed. If approved, they'll be located along Scott Street, Parnell Place, Pacific and Hunter Streets. But the idea has raised concerns for patrons of outdoor eateries.
There were 80 buses an hour, I think, transiting Newcastle East. Now, not all of those, but the majority of them will be coming around that corner. So it's not just a bus every now and then, it's going to be fairly rapid. And I think the noise and the proximity of the people that are dining on the footpath area will just be spoiled.
The proposal will be considered by Council. Melinda Smith, NBN News.
Pastor Chuck McElhenney is in Australia for a month. The controversial American has become well known for his book, When the Wicked Sees a City, which is critical of the homosexual movement in San Francisco.
San Francisco, with all its romantic notions and its imagery, is a city that is breaking down. There is an anarchy that's going on because the city officially has rejected what we believe is historic biblical moral values.
At the invitation of the Festival of Light, Chuck and his wife Donna will tour Australia, lecturing church groups on homosexuality. Pastor McElhenney says issues such as Sydney's gay Mardi Gras should be addressed as moral problems. Christian families, he claims, are offended by such actions. While he says his beliefs are aligned strictly with the scriptures, his writings and speeches have received much criticism. For the pastor and his wife, it's become a life-threatening mission to speak out against homosexuality. At their home in San Francisco, the windows are made of bulletproof glass. They regularly receive death threats.
Just before we came last week, we had a series of calls every night, people harassing, threatening us and so forth. So that goes on just constantly.
Pastor McElhenney will be lecturing at Newcastle City Hall tonight at 7:30. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Two of the latest arrivals from a fleet of ships looking for friendly ports around Australia docked in Newcastle this morning. The New Zealand vessels Rangitoto and Rangakura were to have been handled by Australian stevedores wharfies in Sydney, but the company managed to deal with another company, Conhorst, to have the Conhorst workers unload the ships. Cargoes of timber and containers will be freighted by road and rail to Sydney. The Maritime Union of Australia maintains its fight is with Australian stevedores and is not a bid to tie up shipping around Australia.
We've attempted to limit this dispute to Australian stevedores. We've been very successful here in Newcastle. There's only one ship in dispute at the moment, and that's been provoked directly by Australian stevedores management.
30 wharfies were still early this morning when they refused to work a double shift loading the Osprey Arrow for Australian stevedores.
They'll report for work at the next rostered shift. Ready to work, prepared to work. It'll be up to Australian stevedores management whether they allow them to work or not.
The Newcastle branch of the union claims it's not under pressure from other ports to impose delaying tactics on the New Zealand ships. It says a 2-hour delay in unloading this morning because the wharf's toilets weren't considered clean enough for workers was a separate matter.
The union has put forward the proposals that the other stevedoring companies operate this cargoes. We've encouraged the other stevedoring companies to carry out this work, so it would be foolish on our part if we attempted to hinder it in any way.
Tyrrell's Supremo, Murray Tyrrell, was presented with the Graham Gregory Trophy for his outstanding contribution to the industry over many years. At the presentation, Mr Tyrrell said of all the honours bestowed on him throughout the years, this one he treasures the most. As well, the Tyrrell's family company won 3 trophies, 4 gold medals, 8 silver and 10 bronze. Another major Sydney award, the Seabrook Trophy for white wine success, went to McWilliams Mount Pleasant, largely due to the success of its Elizabeth Semelon. Gold medals also went to McWilliams' 89 Mountain Range Chardonnay and the 91 OP-OH Hermitage.
The entrance to the Moonee pit was welded shut today. It's still being ventilated, but all mining operations have ceased. The closure is part of an agreement between mining giant CRA and a consortium headed by former Coal and Allied Chief Executive Tony Haroldson, which is in the process of buying all CRA's underground mines. Mr Haroldson is keeping open the Wallara pit and the Chain Valley mine. Around 30 men were employed at Moonee, most of them there since the pit opened 12 years ago. They were at the Catherine Hill Bay pub this morning, talking about days past and what lies ahead of them.
It's a good pit to work in and good safe pit, and good blokes to be with. It'll be a sad day for Catherine Hill Bay itself too.
I would have loved to have seen it happen that we could have stayed there. If they could have found some way they could have kept it open, but looks like that's not going to be.
Voluntary redundancy. Around 6 have chosen to take up the offer. The company says the rest will have jobs at the Wallara mine. It also estimates around 14 office staff will lose their jobs. This is the first of many trips these posties will make from the Gateshead facility. Suburbs from Belmont to Whitebridge will be serviced from the centre, which Australia Post estimates will cut delivery time by around an hour. 8 million letters and around 150,000 parcels a year will come through the facility, which will replace the delivery sections of Belmont and Charlestown post offices. By October, they'll be refurbished and opened as shop fronts, selling everything from stamps to office supplies. While the Gateshead facility will cater for residential customers, it's specifically aimed at businesses.
Ease of access from motor vehicle, specialised service, specialised products, ability to operate accounts, people who are well versed in business customer needs.
Australians can do their bit to help fight a forgotten war. A civil war has raged in Sri Lanka for more than a decade and has cost thousands of lives and displaced many more families. Father Oswald Firth is touring Australia hoping to foster awareness and raise about $4 million for the Catholic Relief Appeal's efforts in Sri Lanka and other poor countries. Father Firth says it's dangerous to speak of the troubles affecting his homeland. The outspoken have often been the targets of terrorist attacks. Money raised goes into partnerships with needy communities, which decide where it can be best spent.
The money that we have been receiving from Australia has been used to set up shelters for the refugee people. It has also helped to sustain at least 16% of the refugees and provide school books, medicines, food items to the people who have been displaced.
The Breakers grabbed the lead only 1 minute into the game through an indirect free kick from Ralph Meyer, 20 metres out. It was probably one of the most spiteful games seen in the league this year. Referee Peter Spears was kept busy on the whistle, often earning the wrath of the crowd for his enthusiasm to flash the yellow card. However, the abuse from the crowd peaked late in the second half after Neil Owens was penalised for allegedly interfering with the Parramatta attacker. The players knew it, and a replay shows the Eagles player slipping on the ground. Marshall Soper then had a one-on-one shot for the equaliser and didn't miss. Parramatta escaped with the draw, and despite the result, Breakers captain Darren Stewart would have been a hard man to upset. Just hours earlier, his fiancée Jenny gave birth to their first child. Matthew Raymond Stewart weighed in at a healthy 7 pounds 13 ounces. His proud father says he intends to spend most of next week searching for a miniature pair of soccer boots. It was a day more suited to ducks and fish than swimmers, but that didn't stop 200 competitors taking the plunge at Cole Point. Each year, the 4-kilometre race to Belmont Bay attracts a top-class field of local competitors, and despite most of them being pool swimmers, coaches encourage their distance strokers to enter for the opportunity to really stretch out rather than work wall-to-wall in the pool. And while the rain continued to fall and the chop picked up, Joseph Mitchell put more and more distance between himself and the rest of the field. And when he touched land at Belmont, he was just 40 seconds off the record and 2.5 minutes ahead of second place.
I looked back about 4 times and saw that I had good lead, so I felt pretty comfortable. I wasn't worried.
The battle for second came down to a last-metre sprint, Joshua Blair winning out ahead of Nat McGregor. The first woman home was 13-year-old Madeline Phillips from Broadmeadow. The academy has been up and running for 6 years now, and while the coaches and teams have received the odd pat on the back from various local councils, it's the first time one of them has handed out the cash. Lake Macquarie Council today offered $5,000 towards the program.
It's about time that local government made a commitment to the young people of our region.
And it may not be the last time the council digs into its coffers.
If we've made the commitment once, well, surely we should be looking at some sort of long-term commitment to the academy and the young people of our region.
The academy is also starting up a league squad. The Knights are backing the scheme and will supply the coaching staff.
A significant day in the evolution of our development program. It's 2 years in the planning to get this program up and running. It'll be skill development, team-specific development, and then we'll branch out into other areas such as financial management, public speaking, etc.
Successful applicants will be selected from the various local representative teams and talent identification programs.
Religious leaders, volunteers and day patients sat side by side for the opening of the renovations at the Mercy Community Care Centre in Tyers Hill. The kitchen and sunroom is an extension of the helping hand reaching out to thousands of aged people throughout the inner city over the last 18 years. Six months ago, the centre had 2 full-time staff, 45 volunteers and 60 visitors a week, but simply not enough space. But the extensions give the elderly day patients meals on the premises and a warm atmosphere.
I think it promotes the human dignity of a person, being able to provide for them a social outlet which otherwise they wouldn't have.
The Department of Human Services and Health provided $130,000 with an extra $10,000 raised by the centre. But more funds are needed if it's to help more people enjoy their retiring life.
We are only operating 3 days per week, but now we have the capacity but not the funding to go to 5 days per week.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Lake Macquarie has traditionally produced a formidable squad of 505 sailors, including Chris and Daryl Nicholson, who have won 3 national titles and a world championship. The brothers are chasing another world title in an advanced 505 made of fiberglass, carbon fibre and balsa wood. The sails are another high-tech hybrid petrochemical material called Technora. The black webbing gives the sail its non-stretch strength. They'll be competing off Durban and will need some ocean racing practice.
We'll be training out off Newcastle and Swansea Heads in the 5 weeks leading up to when we leave each day.
Seems like a pretty small sort of nutshell to be taking outside.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's small enough to go up and over the waves rather than try and break its way through, I hope.
Also on sailing, the Newcastle Cruising Yacht Club will come a step closer to reality with a meeting of financial members tonight. The club will be formally established and use Queen's Wharf as its temporary home base. The club is eager to establish itself with cruising facilities in Newcastle Harbour and will be in the bidding to build a marina as part of the Honeysuckle development. The Development Corporation prefers a site near Wickham for a marina. The club's foundation members say Newcastle is long overdue for recreational boating services and is often bypassed by blue water sailors. Andrew Lobb, NBN News.
More than 300 people want to care for the horse, nicknamed Arrow.
Our phones have been running hot. Our after-hours emergency service last night was just completely inundated with people making a wonderful response.
The small stallion is recovering after he was found in bushland at Mount Sugarloaf near Newcastle with the arrows lodged in his rump and shoulder. One penetrated 5 centimetres into his flesh. Most of the phone callers offered a home for Arrow, but as the pony is not legally theirs, the RSPCA cannot let him go. If an owner doesn't collect him within 6 weeks, the horse can then be fostered out. Meanwhile, archery groups have been outraged by the attack, calling for a meeting with the RSPCA to track down the cruel hunter.
These people have been in touch with us, and we will be establishing a meeting with them and giving them the information that we have in the hopes of identifying who the perpetrator has been.
Experts say the type of arrows used and the way the animal was injured may assist in finding the culprit. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Clearly Chosen is rapidly becoming the punter's choice. The 3-year-old gelding has a wild side that works to his advantage on race days. Last Saturday he was 10-1 on the tote and came from a wide barrier to romp home in the Hobartville Stakes.
He was very deep all the way, and he wanted to race a bit himself, you know, and he got away straight and up. It was a real strong win.
It was also a race with the best 3-year-old talent around. His preparation, though, was unlike the others. Clearly Chosen, instead of entering lead-up races, came straight from a spell.
He was in good form last time, and he was going over for the Sandown Guineas, and he was on the tarmac ready to be put on the plane, and they found they've had him on the wrong crate. So as it turned out, he couldn't go to Melbourne, and I eventually gave him a spell straight after that.
Perry isn't too keen to see history repeat itself. Last year, one of his horses, Navy Seal, won the Hobartville and has hardly been heard of since.
After he won the Hobartville last year, we were sort of never right, more or less from straight after that. You know, he has a fair bit of leg trouble and feet trouble.
So you can guarantee Paul Perry will be carefully mapping out Clearly Chosen's future.
Well, I think he had to be rated one of our top horses in the past decade. He proved that. I think he won 11 stakes races in all.
One of Australia's most popular gallopers, Naturalism, has arrived at his new retirement home, Sedgenhoe Stud, 12 kilometres southeast of Scone. For the 5-year-old, it's a sentimental reunion with his sire Palace Music, also a Sedgenhoe resident. Internationally, the Queensland-born horse made headlines in the lucrative 1992 Japan Cup. One of 2 Australasian horses invited to race, the 16 hands high galloper was beaten by a neck in a photo finish. After being unplaced in the 93 Japan Cup last November, Naturalism was retired. His results over his 3-year career a positive pointer to quality breeding potential.
He proved himself over all distances, and this is what breeders like to see. Not a dour stayer, but a horse that can exhibit some acceleration and perhaps pass that into his offspring.
Winning more than $3 million in his career, Naturalism is the highest stakes earner to stand at stud in the Hunter Valley. The 5-year-old's presence here reinforcing the region's reputation as being the thoroughbred capital of Australia.
Most people tend to consider the Hunter Valley loosely or as the Kentucky of New South Wales. Within a 100-mile radius of Scone, we have most of the major commercial thoroughbred studs.
Naturalism is expected to begin breeding around September. Tony Bott estimates his offspring fetching between $50,000 and $100,000 each. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.